Hey everyone, another episode in the works here. I've got a podcast that was recorded by a friend of mine, Mark Iron. He's from Australia. You can find him on Instagram at School for Success. He's got about a 500,000 followers, and he put this whole episode on his Instagram page, but then he sent it to me just because, again, he saw I had a podcast just like Justin Nault, and he wanted to help out. So we had a great conversation talking about his DNA. We're kind of jumping around a little bit more than normal, but some interesting points, some interesting takes. I hope you enjoy it. Check out ajconsultingcompany.com if you want to have your DNA analyzed. Of course, I've got that Patreon page, patreon.com/Anthony G J A Y, Anthony G J. Cool video on there shooting fish. Hope you enjoy that, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
All right. So, what do you think of my genes? I guess that's
Yeah, they're actually really interesting, really good. It'll be
yep,
fun to talk about them.
yep.
So you had some time to look over the report.
I have I found it interesting that vitamin E causes inflammation in me, the man-made type vitamin E. Is that
Right.
right? Yeah. Come on. That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, especially the type that you find in most multivitamins
Yeah.
called tocopherol. And um, that doesn't mean all vitamin E, of course. There's a natural form called tocotrienols that's excellent, but in your case, it's hard to find that. If you
Right.
look on the multivitamin labels, most of them are tocopherols.
Gofferol's right. Okay. So, I guess I need to find a multivitamin that doesn't have that in it. What does that do inside my body? Is it gut inflammation or is it systemic inflammation? What actually is the
Yeah. Well, let's jump right into the report, right? Because
yeah.
if you look on which page is it? It's basically under the heart disease section. I guess that's page 5.
All right, I might just share my screen so
Perfect.
people on YouTube and other places can see this DNA report. All right. So which
Yeah.
page?
Yeah. So keep scrolling down a little bit. You're close. And yeah, there you go. So you see at the very bottom, it says CRP blood levels,
Yep.
C-reactive protein that refers to.
Mm-hmm.
If you go down below that, you see that gene that says IL-6 receptor,
IL-6, yeah.
IL-6R, excuse me. Yeah,
Interleukin. Mm.
exactly. Interleukin 6. So interleukin is a form of inflammation, just like CRP is, and just like TNF alpha, and just like interferons, right? There's a number of different types of inflammation
Yep.
that activate your immune cells that cause them to chew things up, whether that's bacteria in the case of like a flesh wound, or whether that's your joints,
Yeah, well, I had 5 shoulder surgeries, so severe,
Yeah,
severe not asthma, I mean arthritis.
right.
So, yeah,
Exactly. So, this gene indicates that you have a higher level of interleukin 6, just basically just part of your genetics, right? And the problem with having higher levels of IL-6 is that also triggers CRP. So you can measure it, and sometimes doctors will measure interleukin 6, but usually they don't bother, because if your IL-6 is high, then your CRP will also be high.
right.
So because everybody measures CRP anyways, that's a proxy for IL-6.
Yeah,
So the,
okay.
the point is, you have a genetic tendency to have higher CRP,
Right.
which you can bring down, right? I mean, healthy eating, exercise, avoiding a bunch of these toxins. I mean, the usual stuff, right? Even supplementing DHA helps if you really need to go crazy.
Okay, so
But
what about
but
EPA? Does that play into this, or is it just solely DHA?
EPA, well, that's a good question. Yeah, I think any of the omega-3s will lower CRP.
Right.
hmm But what's interesting, the reason I jump ahead and bring this one up is
Mm-hmm.
because tocopherols for you, and we might as well just scroll down to that gene, which is way down. Gosh, where is that? At page 10, I guess. It's like under the B vitamins. And then the vitamin E section. So keep going down. There you go.
Right. Right. Yep.
Vitamin E, that gene that says GSTP1, that basically what that indicates is if you are supplementing the fake version of vitamin E, let's call it the tocopherol, right? That actually triggers interleukin 6. So that's the mechanism.
Okay, and
And
that
in
would
your
be
case,
systemic.
it's particularly problematic, right? Because you have that gene we just mentioned, which is the interleukin 6 receptor. So you're already disposed to have higher interleukin 6. And then if you're taking some fake version of vitamin E, it's also going to increase it and thereby exacerbate the problem.
Okay, so I've got a double whammy for inflammation right there.
Right. Exactly. I mean, as long as you're avoiding tocopherol, you don't, but most people, it sneaks in there, right? Like you'll find it in your DHA supplements, like your fish oil supplements. You find it in your multivitamins at high dose. Some people even buy vitamin E supplements and take them at high dose. And I think it's okay if your genes are great, but you know, if you have this gene, you definitely don't want to do that. They've even found in the 1990s, they discovered that high dose vitamin E supplements increase your risk for cancer.
Wow.
Particularly if you're a smoker. And of course, they assumed it was going to be the other way around. That's why they were doing that study. And I think it was even in the New England Journal of Medicine, they published it, and they didn't know how to explain it at the time. They just said, we're shocked, you know, we found, here's the finding, here's the data, we don't know how to interpret it. But high levels of vitamin, if you supplement vitamin E, it increases cancer. And it was quite high. I can't remember the number, but, and now we know it's because number one, you don't want to be chronically taking antioxidants, because those can sometimes, if you get cancer, they actually help the cancer cells survive.
Okay,
so that's the first thing. Although vitamin C is an exception to that, because vitamin C can be converted to hydrogen peroxide, and then that kills cancer cells. So that's a unique exception. But most of these other antioxidants, if you're chronically taking them, it can potentially lead to cancer cells, basically cancer cells just surviving.
Does that also drive into, I know that spices are high in antioxidant, and I kind of use a lot of spices. Would that play into this problem as well?
It could. I mean, you know, the good news about those is the spices have a lot of additional factors that would probably kill cancer cells, you know, a lot of anti-cancer properties. So you're not like isolating a single individual antioxidant and just taking that.
Yeah.
So I would say you'd be fine there, would be my guess. But particularly because when they study different herbs and spices and things, they find a lot of anti-tumor properties. They don't find increased risk of cancer.
Yeah.
If anything, they find the opposite, which is good.
Yeah. So what this is showing me is that everyone is different and there's no cookie cutter routine. So if you just go haphazard, oh, vitamin E is good, and you've got my genetics, it's not good. It can cause inflammation, which basically switches gears. You've got lower energy, your brain doesn't work as well. And of course, our DHEA and testosterone is going to lower as well. So all these important hormones are going to lower when we're in a state of inflammation, because we're supplementing these vitamins and we don't know our genetics and how they play into it.
Exactly. Yeah. Anytime somebody says, I've got the perfect diet for everybody, you know it's a red flag, right?
Yeah, it's just stand up and back away very quietly.
Yeah, exactly. Or very quickly. But that's one of the other reasons when they do these multivitamin studies that crop up every couple of years, they make headlines. They'll show that multivitamins have no benefit, generally, is what the findings will say, or the headlines will say.
Yeah.
And that's often because there are a lot of benefits to a lot of vitamins, but when you take them as a multi, oftentimes you have this exact situation where you're actually causing more inflammation in people, and that offsets all the benefits that other people are experiencing, and then it turns out to be an average neutral, a net neutral.
So I guess what you could take away from these research papers, if they don't play into genetics and SNPs, it's kind of a useless study.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a complicated thing, when they're doing these studies that are just they're just lumping everybody together and they're not considering people's genetics. It's not a great way to do a research study, or dosing people with drugs, right? If somebody has cancer, they should be factoring in all their unique genetic variants and trying to
Yeah.
incorporate the knowledge that you can get from it. And most doctors
Mm.
don't. They're way behind the technology curve.
Yeah, like if you've got my genetics, you've got cancer, and you think, oh, I better get some vitamins, get a supplement of vitamins, and you get vitamin E, it's going to fuel cancer. So, I
Exactly.
mean, this
Yeah,
information, people really have to slow down and absorb this information and go to doctors like yourself to get their genes read so they can make, educated choices that's going to move their individual genes and enzymes in the right direction, health and performance.
exactly. Oh, I appreciate that. And I can't remember if I already sent it to you, but I'm definitely going to send you a special link where people can get a discount through you
Yep.
when we're off air here, and you can share that with people later.
Excellent. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the vitamin B, that's another interesting one just because we're on that page.
Yep.
You've got some issues taking up vitamin B12, excuse me.
Yep.
I don't know if I said D, but vitamin B12 doesn't
B12.
it doesn't go up through your gut particularly well. So it is a really
Okay.
important one for you to either supplement or make sure you're getting plenty of meat, and I assume you are.
Yeah. I do a bit of over 7 days. I do 3 to 4 days semi-carnivore, not completely. So I'm eating a lot of meat, and then a couple of days keto, then a couple of days paleo. So that's kind of what I'm
Good.
doing at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so in your case, this one you got covered already. I mean, it's good to know the B12 is a real priority if you're not eating meat. If you're a vegan, for example, you'd really struggle. After about a year, these genes would catch up to you.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
that's
that's another good
interesting.
example, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
another
That's
example of
interesting.
how the genetics are critical to understanding which diet you
Yeah,
should be on.
yeah. Like, I mean, if you want to play at a whole new level, you really do have to think about investing in getting your genes read, because then it just gives you so many levers to pull down on. Like, as we just spoke about, vitamin E causes inflammation in me, which will make me tired, will make me moody, which will just, this can cause low level anxiety in people like myself because I've got a propensity for anxiety. So, I mean, people have got a lot of power when
Sure.
they get their genes read out. I mean, it's just so important if you want to play on a whole new level.
Right. Well,
Mm.
I mean, and thankfully you've got good heavy metal genes. Should we jump up to the brain section and talk about
Yeah,
anxiety for a second?
absolutely. Like a lot of people have got low level anxiety and they don't realize that it stems from inflammation a lot of times. So where are we?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so at the very top it says brain optimization genes. So I have a whole category on just the brain genes,
Excellent. All right.
and
So
and you've got phenomenal genes in terms of Alzheimer's risk and just brain
yes.
performance,
Well,
which is good. Yeah,
that's good to know.
right. Because all these empty categories that you see, that means you don't have any gene issues there.
Right.
And the reason I don't fill those out, some people like to give 70-page reports and things with
Yeah.
all the different genes, but the thing is, it's just confusing, it's overwhelming. I only want to find the bad ones because then we can determine how to fix those bad
Yeah.
genes.
Exactly. That's what you
And
optimize for, the bad ones. Yeah.
right, everybody's got thousands of good genes, so those don't
Mm.
interest me. Spend all day talking about good genes and patting
Yeah.
ourselves on the back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But the one serotonin gene there, which is HTR2A,
Yep.
sometimes that triggers depression, sometimes anxiety. And it basically means your serotonin receptor doesn't stick as tightly to serotonin.
Okay.
And, it's not that rare, but in our culture, of course, there's a lot of things that are pushing people to get anxiety. And serotonin, 90% of it is made in your gut. So if the first and foremost principle here is to have a healthy gut, right? And eat healthy.
Right. Yeah.
And most people overlook that and they want to get on some kind of Prozac or some kind of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, SSRI drug, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those are super, super common, like Zoloft, Prozac, Paxil, Lexapro, right? Celexa.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you'd pretty much name it, and people are taking it these days in terms of these anxiety drugs. And again, usually it's gut health.
Yeah. Like when I had anxiety in my early 30s, panic attacks as well, they
Mm-hmm.
put me on uh, it's called over here in Australia Advanza. I forget what the name of it is, the medical name of it, what it is, but I learnt later that this is changing the receptor ratios in my brain chemically, right? So it's interfering with the natural rhythm of my brain. And when the underlying issue for me, for the majority of it, was just simply inflammation.
Right. Doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, you're disposed to it, but usually if you have a healthy gut, that's all it takes, right? But
Yeah.
just general things that increase serotonin are also good, you know, like sunshine
Yeah.
and even some of these supplements that naturally increase serotonin. For example, 5-HTP usually tells your body to make more serotonin, so that's sometimes good.
Yeah.
Tryptophan is a building block for serotonin, so it helps to make sure you've got plenty of tryptophan, which is of course an amino acid. So you find that in protein. Like people say when you eat a lot of turkey, they say you feel tired because of the tryptophan.
Insulin.
And that it's a little bit
Yeah.
it's questionable whether that's true or whether it's just because people ate loads of carbs on Thanksgiving in America. But the tryptophan, you know, but these increasing serotonin usually helps you sleep, you know.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have these genetic issues and they're linked to their sleep problems at the root cause as well.
Yeah, I saw two interesting studies about serotonin, sulfur amino acids, and dopamine. If you get too much of one, it drops the other one. So if you take L-tryptophan by itself, it'll deplete the dopamine out of your brain, and vice versa. Dopamine, too much of that, it depletes serotonin. So if people from that study, I thought that was fascinating. So I stopped supplementing both tyrosine and L-tryptophan. But what I did, and the other study that I found was light therapy. They did acute tryptophan depletion study on women who suffered with that. And the light therapy, I think it was 30 minutes of light therapy. And I've got one here right in front of me. I use it constantly in the mornings. So it stops that. They did a study and it actually stops that acute tryptophan depletion crossing the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And it's especially interesting in light of your genetics because you tend to have lower dopamine as well.
Yeah.
And you can see that if you go down to the COMT gene, and that is, I know we're kind of jumping around, but I figure it's a podcast rather than anything else, so it's more interesting for people if we jump a little bit. But
the dopamine's a
on
big one
page
for
9,
motivation, right? I mean, if you want to take the day on, you need optimal levels, not up and down. Because if you get up and down level, for me, is I'm bored, then I'm energized, I'm bored, and there's just you're distracted, you're all over the shop.
Right. So go to page 9, and there's a section called cannabis. Speaking of motivation.
Yeah, I think I've gone too far.
Yeah, possibly. We were talking. It's actually pretty close to that B9 and vitamin E section. Yeah, you're excuse me, you're close there. Let's see. Try and find where you are there. So it's a little bit below where you are. Oops. So go down a little bit lower. Yep, keep going down. I'll watch your screen instead of mine. Keep going down, down.
There it is. Is that it? Yeah.
Cannabis.
COMT2.
You got it. You got it.
Methyltransferase. Yeah.
Yep, catechol methyltransferase. And the version that you have, right? The reason it comes up in the cannabis section is because, you know, basically if you smoke cannabis,
I crush my testosterone.
Well, that, right? Which you read about in my book, but also specific to your I mean, that's true of everybody, I think. But specific to you, it'll especially decrease your motivation through your dopamine because you're already breaking down dopamine faster than most people, so you already tend to have lower levels. That's what this gene is telling me.
Right.
Not necessarily a problem because you can bring that up with sunshine and high protein diets and caffeine and music and a lot of other things that I list here.
Yeah.
But again, when you smoke cannabis, it's a pretty difficult thing to recover from. You know, you really decrease your motivation. And if there is a schizophrenia risk linked to cannabis, which is kind of questionable to be honest, but a lot of scientists swear that there is a risk of triggering schizophrenia if you're smoking cannabis. And this is the gene that they point to. If there is a link, this is definitely the gene and the version you have. And so for that reason, I usually tell people, don't play with fire, you know, like if you got this gene, it's just not worth it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess cannabis makes you feel good while you're doing it, but the after effects of that are just devastating, which makes you go back to cannabis.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, that's why it comes up there. But it's interesting that you mentioned dopamine because, you know, you're kind of on the lower edge of having less dopamine, and then you're on the edge of having less serotonin. So bumping both of those up is a good thing. You know?
I didn't know serotonin was an issue, but that's, makes sense.
Yeah, it's not even as much about the low levels of serotonin with that that hydroxytryptamine receptor gene we were talking about in the brain section. It's more about it doesn't bind to the receptor as tightly. So even if you have the same level as somebody else, it's like having the volume turned down, you know?
Yeah, okay.
When it binds the receptor, it just doesn't stick. So it takes more for you to get the same result, you know?
Yeah, okay. So I've got to really watch out for that one for sure.
Well, and this one oftentimes has implications with pain sensitivity as well. And again, just to stay on theme with bouncing around, if you go to the gym section, right, if you keep going down to page 12 or 13, there's actually a section on pain sensitivity and your genetics relating to pain sensitivity.
Gym, yeah.
It's kind of there you go, at the very bottom of this whole section. So it's on page 13.
Pain sensitivity.
Yeah. You see how that COMT gene comes up there?
Right, yeah.
And then you've got an additional gene that further alters your pain sensitivity, and you're a super low pain sensitivity. Like you basically just don't feel pain.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
Especially with that SCN9A. I mean, that's a really rare gene. Not a lot of people have that version.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's not a bad thing, right? But if you really have to tune in, if you feel pain, you got to really pay attention to it because you might blow out a knee or something. It's already pretty far along. If you're feeling pain, that means it's really far.
Yeah, like I'm doing back 10 years ago, I used to lift quite heavy weights. I blew out my adductor and I kept going.
Right, exactly.
And I was off.
Yeah, and
well,
people that have the opposite extreme, right, where they have super high sensitivity to feeling their pain, they feel all the pain.
Yeah.
They have to really push through the pain, right? When they're out jogging or something, they just want to wimp out.
Yeah.
But in your case, you definitely don't want to do that, or you'll have that exact situation.
Yeah, I need to be very in tune. Yeah.
What's that?
I need to be in tune with my pain. Like, I guess when I feel like I'm done, I should just back off instead of pushing. Like, you're told by the big bodybuilders, push through the pain. That's really bad advice, clearly, for myself and my genetics.
Right, and that's kind of rare, and you're really extreme on the powerlifting too, which is, it's also, this one's an advantage. If you go to the muscle fiber type, just one page up at the very top of the gym gene section,
yeah,
that ACTN3 indicates that you're really fast twitch, plus for fast twitch, meaning
plus.
You're a sprinter, a power lifter. You're not like an endurance guy.
That makes sense.
And you're really extreme. Yeah. And the ACVR1B gene, another one that's not super common, but you're basically, you have higher muscle strength per volume of muscle.
Okay.
So if you have the same size muscle somebody else, you're going to be stronger in general. And so you've got like a phenomenal heavy weightlifting genes, as long as you keep that inflammation down, right?
Well,
keep your joints healthy.
I stopped lifting heavy weights probably 6 years ago because I was just getting too many injuries.
Right.
And that's probably why,
you have a lot of, I mean, and it's hard because once you get some of those injuries, it can be tough to recover if you ever do recover with some of that scar tissue and things. I mean, I'm really grateful that you're doing keto because these HLA genes just below that, HLA DRB1 and DRB9.
Yep.
Those ones give you a higher risk of arthritis. And I'll give you the numbers here. Let me just look at my notes. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, with 5 shoulder surgeries under my belt. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I mean, the first one is a 4-fold increased risk for arthritis. The next one's another 4-fold, and the next one's a 2-fold, that DRB9.
Wow.
So that's a lot of risk. But
Mm.
here's the catch. The catch is that all of those genes are triggered by high insulin. So as
Okay.
long as you're keeping your blood sugar low, your insulin low, or optimized, I should say, your
That's
joints are protected.
like this for our listeners is absolutely key. High insulin, arthritis, AGEs, advanced glycation end products, it all drives into that, doesn't it? So it's a huge thing that people need to understand, that if they're feeling pain, like even they wake up in the morning, their neck's sore, their back's a bit sore, like this could be driving into that. Would that be right?
Oh yeah, for
Mm.
sure. And I'm glad you brought up AGE, advanced glycation end products. Uh, it's such a great area of research that's been neglected a lot, in the past decades, and now they're of course really looking into that, and it's clearly an inflammatory component of just eating a high carb diet,
Yeah.
um,
And I
especially
saw,
for you.
yeah, definitely. And I saw I don't know how true it is, but it's a study that up to 80% of the world's population has some form of insulin resistance, which causes
Yeah,
these AGEs to build up. And I mean, if you're
right,
30 and you're experiencing joint pain, holy shit, this is what's going on
right.
inside you. You've got chronic low grade inflammation that's going to dull you. The energy won't be there. The brain won't work properly. And a lot of people think, oh, it's just me, I'm getting older. But if you look at what we're talking about here today, they can fix this. I mean, they can fix this.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It's funny when I do DNA consults for people that are younger, they oftentimes, I'll point some of these genes out and they'll say, yeah, I don't really notice that. I don't feel like I've got leaky gut. I don't feel like I have anxiety. I don't feel like I have back disc issues, even though you have genes for back disc issues, whatever. But then of course, when I do consults, but I'll tell them, like, well, start now and prevent that stuff, right? Because your genes are a pretty good indicator that of what's to come. But then when I do consults with 70-year-old people or 60 or whatever, they're like, oh yeah, I've got back disc issues. Oh yeah, I've got anxiety, right? Like it's already
Yeah,
been, real exposed.
yeah. And I guess with my
So
high pain
that's the power of it.
tolerance,
It's like a crystal ball.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess with my high pain tolerance, I put up with
Mm-hmm.
it as long as I could. But I got bursitis. That was the first sign, and it got to a point where I couldn't even sleep. I was in that much pain. So that wouldn't be a good
Right.
thing, because it's degenerating the joints at a much faster rate, and that's why I needed those shoulder surgeries. So that pain tolerance issue for me
Yeah.
is a bad thing.
Right. Yeah. You don't catch it quite as early on.
Mm.
Um, Well, and blood flow is really important for your joints too, and that's the next category. And of course, that's true for everybody, right? I mean, we have
Yeah,
synovial fluid in our joints. We don't have a lot of blood vessels.
blood flow. Yeah,
So,
yeah,
getting nutrients into the joints and getting toxins out requires a lot of movement.
yep.
And especially for you, because you have some gene issues here, you know,
Mm.
infrared, by the way, helps that as well. If it basically indicates this gene ITGAV indicates you're a higher responder to infrared.
Okay.
Um, so that's another option if you want to,
Yeah,
put
definitely.
infrared
Yeah.
lights on your joints.
Mm. Yeah.
Have you ever had disc issues in your back?
Yeah, I have actually.
Yeah, you've had it all.
Yeah, it's well, that's why I don't do heavy weights anymore, but I just can't tolerate it. Yeah, I'll
Right,
get my
right.
lower back will just if I go too heavy, yeah, I won't even know it's happening, and a couple hours later I'll be going, okay, yeah, oh, it was too heavy. It's the problem with me.
Sure.
Mm.
Yeah, because you have that collagen gene, CILP, that's a cartilage intermediate layer protein gene related to collagen production.
Right.
So of course, once you've had some of those disc issues, it's hard to reverse them, but it certainly helps to keep the collagen coming in your diet, keep the bone broth coming, take that
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah. What about
Uh,
just pure glycine? Would that be
yeah,
as good,
helps
or
for
yep?
sure.
So, okay, so I
I
definitely
mean, I
need
don't
some
know if it's
collagen.
as good or yeah, it might be. I'm not 100% sure either way, but I do
Mm,
love glycine as well,
mm,
particularly right before bed. If you try that and you might see your sleep improve. A lot of people do.
yeah,
Um,
Yeah, I saw some research on that recently from Dr. James Di Nicolantonio about glycine, and he said that, yeah, I think 3 grams before bed, it can actually improve your sleep or something like that. But
Yeah, yeah, it works for me. And
mm,
ironically, there's a few genes that you don't have that where glycine is super important
mm,
for improving people's sleep. So then in that case, of course, I would flag those genes, tell people to prioritize taking glycine. And again, you don't have those genes, so we don't have to go through all the details there. But
excellent.
it still helps even if you don't have the genes.
Yeah,
Oftentimes, just like magnesium, right? Like you do have in the sleep section at the very bottom, you have a gene that's pretty common. It's called a clock gene. And everybody has the gene, but the
of
version you've
course.
got is pretty common,
Right,
and it indicates you're a higher responder to magnesium. So magnesium before bed is particularly useful. It's actually anti-inflammatory as well.
right, okay, yep,
And so, that one is pretty common. And and most people are either deficient or really suboptimal with magnesium, depending how you define the normal range.
right, yeah,
I think 70% of Americans are suboptimal / deficient in magnesium. So really setting themselves up for poor sleep, you know?
yeah. And considering that it's magnesium is bound to every ATP molecule that we produce for
Right.
energy, so I mean the list goes on and on. It's DNA repair
Exactly.
enzymes. It just goes on. It's just a really important one. And 70% are deficient.
Yeah,
Energy
it's insane.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big problem with our soil these days. Our soil just doesn't have these micronutrients because they're so depleted. All they put on the soil is phosphorus and nitrogen when they put fertilizer on.
Yeah.
They don't replace these micronutrients and these magnesiums and things the plants are taking out.
Mm.
Uh, it's leading to long-term health issues that people
Yeah.
aren't even aware of.
I guess for
And
the
that's why
farmers.
when people say you don't need to supplement, I'm really skeptical there too, because yeah, maybe that was true for our ancestors, but they didn't have crap soil, you know?
Exactly. We have to think in layers, don't we? Really, like our ancestors, there was abundance of these micronutrients. But today, as you say, we've got 8 billion people on the planet we've got to feed, and these micronutrients are just depleted. So, of course, we
Yeah,
need to supplement for, if
right.
especially if you want to take the day on and have energy. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
And
yeah.
yeah, that's 100%. It's so funny, like there's so many people that are okay with low energy. It doesn't make any sense to me that you'd be happy with that. That basically, you make more money at the end of the day if you've got more energy generally because you're more driven, you're more motivated, you're doing better work.
Yeah.
So even from a financial perspective, it's better to spend a little money on some of these supplements,
Yeah,
and get
like
that energy back up.
exactly. I don't understand that either, because when you've got energy, you feel good. So you're more helpful, you achieve more, and you're driven, you're more curious, and all these things start opening up. And like magnesium, I mean, it's a super easy thing to supplement.
Yeah, it's cheap, it's easy. And lithium sometimes helps that gene too. They've even done clinical studies with that clock gene, the version that you have, and they found improvements with lithium. Again, really low dose lithium, not like outrageous doses that make you feel nauseous and all that.
Yeah, yeah,
So something if you want to tinker, it's an option.
yeah. I supplement magnesium now in the morning and also before bed.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. What other topics?
What about
I want to
testosterone
make
and
this
estrogen?
about testosterone. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Because
think
there's so much here. We could spend 2 hours easily, and since we don't have that kind of time.
yeah, yeah. Well, the histamines, I want to come back to that because I suffered from
Okay.
allergies and also asthma. So that's going to drive into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So testosterone here.
Interesting.
Now we've got estrogen and vitamin D. I mean, that's a big plant. So we could start there.
Yeah, sure. So vitamin D, certainly you've got a few genes here that generally indicate you need to have more vitamin D than normal.
Yeah,
They're pretty common. And of course, in Australia, your blood tests are going to have different units than the American blood test. So
mm,
what I usually tell people, and there's free online conversions, but what I tell people in America is at least make sure your vitamin D levels are above 50 nanograms per milliliter,
yeah,
ng/ml. But the average American is 30.
30.
So,
Yeah.
right. So, and by the way, if you go in and you get a 30, the doctors will tell you that you're fine. They'll say, good, you're good to go. but
But yes,
they've
that's average. That's average. So you're going to have
exactly,
average energy, average, everything. If you want to, be
right,
elite, you want to take life on and have energy, you've got to get it up to those optimal levels.
exactly. And I mean, the way you can determine what those optimal levels might be is look at hunter-gathering tribes that still exist, and we have, and I've seen the blood work from those, and everybody in those tribes, again, these are American units, but everybody is between 70 and 100 on their
Okay.
vitamin D.
Yeah.
So to be at 30 is just not acceptable. And I want to see people at least above 50, because as soon as you dip below 50, you start seeing associations with all kinds of health issues. And doctors will say, well, they're just associations, it's not cause, but still, you don't want any of that. you don't need to
Yeah.
be below 50.
No, if you think about it, if you got all these boxes to tick and this is one of the boxes, that's what you need to do when it comes to
Right.
performance.
Yeah. So for you, again, definitely prioritize getting that as a supplement or getting out in the sun. But then the testosterone right below that,
Yeah.
that FAM9B gene, it's actually, they give it a really generic name. It's called family with sequence similarity 9 member B, which is just obnoxious, right? In other words, we don't know anything about this gene, so we just gave it a
Korean name,
a generic name. And so honestly, the only thing they know about this gene is it causes lower testosterone. So there's not I don't have any great solutions for that gene, because I don't know the actual mechanism of how it causes lower testosterone, but the basics are always important, right? Like taking zinc, exercising, lifting heavy, getting sleep, getting magnesium. I mean, all the basics. Getting boron oftentimes helps. But even with all of that, sometimes with this gene, as you age, you might want to get on some testosterone replacement. But again, usually you can do it naturally if you're really dialed in, and especially if you're avoiding those artificial estrogens.
Yeah, definitely. Like those IRS 10 list in your book is, clearly they were playing into my low testosterone for a long time. So like, I mean, you eliminate that crap. I mean, it's going to step up. So, for me, I was on TRT. I'm off it now, and I've been off it for a couple of years. So my testosterone's in a good range. Yeah. So
it's just more of an uphill battle for you.
Yeah, that's it. I've got to tick all those performance boxes to keep mine up there.
Right. Yeah, you're not given the gift on this one. And SHBG yours tends to be a little bit higher, plus minus. It's not that crazy, but so that makes it harder to get that free testosterone. And then, of course, the estrogen section lights up a little bit too. So you've got a tendency to have higher estrogen. And it's not necessarily blood estrogen. It just means like that ESR1 gene, that's actually your estrogen receptor, your alpha receptor specifically, and it just binds more tightly to estrogen. So again, it has to do with the volume. It's not really about the levels. So like say your estrogen level is at an 80 and somebody else is at an 80. You're going to have a bigger effect from that estrogen than they're going to have because of that gene. So it's not driving the levels up, it's just driving up the response to it, if that makes sense.
So I guess supplementing DIM, would that be beneficial?
Sometimes, yeah. I usually try and avoid that because some people respond so differently. If you overdo the DIM, it actually increases estrogen. And it sometimes increases risk for prostate cancer and things. So that one can be touchy unless you're really dialed in on the dosing. And you're really paying attention to your blood.
When people just supplement, I hear a good thing on the internet, doesn't mean it's a good thing, does it?
Right. And that's why I list broccoli in this suggestions here, and Brussels sprouts and things, because just eating those whole foods has diindolylmethane, it has DIM in it. And it has other things that also help your body clear estrogen. But the best thing, sweating, whether you're working out or sweating in a sauna, by far the best way to clear estrogen.
Okay, so that's what I do every single morning.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's another
that's
box
right.
that I tick for increasing my natural testosterone. Yeah.
Yeah, it
That's
works. I mean,
that's what people have to think. They've got all these boxes they need to tick if they want high testosterone, DHA, high thyroid function,
mhm,
and
mhm,
fasting increases growth hormone. All these boxes that you can tick gives you, plenty of energy, plenty of
right,
testosterone to, feel alive again. So,
right, right. You got it. Yeah,
mm,
I love it. I mean, we probably talked about this on the last time we chatted, but they've done a sauna study with people measuring. They had skin patches on, right, like a nicotine patch without the nicotine,
yeah,
and they had groups of people that went in the sauna and groups of people that didn't go in sauna. And the ones that went in saunas, when they took off those patches and measured for chemicals, they had loads of BPA and phthalates and all these artificial estrogen toxins on those skin patches.
yeah, yeah,
And the people that didn't go in the sauna, they didn't have any of that. And neither of the groups really peed out any estrogen. So the urine was pretty clean.
yeah.
So in other words, they were sweating out all these estrogens and they weren't even urinating them.
So that's a big thing. Like for testosterone, you're getting rid of that. You're lowering sex hormone binding globulin,
Right.
and you're
Yep.
also clearing out the heavy metals as well. So that's going to help with
Right.
testosterone again. So sweating every
Exactly.
single day is a big box to tick for higher levels of testosterone, clearly.
You got it. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Boxes, we've got to keep ticking them. For
Yeah.
people, yeah, that have got kind of crap genetics. But, for Alzheimer's, I've got good genetics, which is really great.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be shocked if it ran in your family, right? You probably don't know anybody in your family
No,
that has it.
no.
Hmm.
My,
Yeah.
my,
Usually it's pretty predictive. Hmm.
yeah, my wife's side, there's her grandmother has it now. She's,
Sure.
yeah. But that could have
Yeah.
been fixed.
I'm working on a book on Alzheimer's because I'm really irritated with the industry, the medical industry on this topic because they just lump it all together as one thing.
Mm,
Just like they used to do with cancer. They used to say cancer is cancer. And they don't say liver cancer. They didn't say brain cancer. They didn't say B-cell lymphoma. They just said cancer,
cancer,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And that's ridiculous because if you want to deal with a certain type of cancer, the more precise you can get, the better you can manage it.
Yeah, and
And
genes play a massive role in it too, but so do fats,
right,
and so does glucose, and a whole
right,
bunch of
right,
different things. Yeah,
right. And it's certainly like a B cell lymphoma in your immune system is going to be totally different than a liver cancer. You know what I
mm,
mean? And Alzheimer's is the same thing. It's like you can't lump it all together. Some people have Alzheimer's because of heavy metal genes and they have issues clearing heavy metals.
yeah, yeah.
Some people they have great heavy metal genes, but they have Alzheimer's because of carbs,
Can't, yeah,
and
yeah.
and on and on and on. I have all these different categories. So I'm basically trying to I'm gonna write a book on this because I feel like it'll literally send shockwaves through the industry because
That'll be
people just
fantastic.
aren't
Yeah,
thinking about it that way.
yeah. Needs a new perspective.
Right.
Mm. Thyroid. I know a lot of people have
Yeah.
got issues with thyroid, and again, these artificial estrogens coming into the system kind of really screw it up as well. And I've got bad genes, it looks like, when it comes to thyroid.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of people do. There's a lot of gene issues you can have in this section. And the key is taking iodine because if you're deficient in iodine, and then you're almost certainly going to be deficient in thyroid hormones.
Mm,
And the iodine is a building block for your thyroid hormones. So if you don't have that, you can't make them. You know,
yeah,
and so especially with your genes, right? You're more sensitive to having that issue.
yeah,
Whereas again, if you have plenty of iodine and you're doing everything else right, usually you're fine. And especially like that FOXE1 gene in the middle there,
yep,
um, they discovered that gene in Chernobyl, the radiation accident,
yep.
and basically people that had the good version of that gene, uh, they had no issues with their thyroid, but people that had the bad version of that gene, when they damaged their thyroid, it didn't heal.
Hmm.
You know, and so then of course now we've looked at what's the actual mechanism, what's going on with that gene, and it's related to autophagy in your thyroid gland. So it's basically your thyroid cells taking out the trash, and yours don't do that as well as they should. They don't have as much autophagy.
Right, right.
And the best way to increase autophagy, as you know, I mean, I'll just let you say it.
Well, yeah, like I fast every single
Exactly.
day
You got
to,
it.
through the week, I go to 5:30 in the afternoon, nothing until 5:30, except from black coffee
Wow.
and some herbal teas. Because I know that some
Right.
black tea and green tea, they've got a lot of, uh, what's the antagonist to iodine?
ECGC,
Yeah,
that
fluoride, isn't it?
epigalactin or whatever.
Don't they have fluoride in
Oh
as
yeah,
well?
yeah, they have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's a
exactly.
big issue for someone like me that's got this poor thyroid output. If I'm having black
Good
tea and
point.
green teas, it's got fluoride in it. It's going to compete for
Yep.
the iodine transport. So that's a big no-no for me to have a lot of tea. And this could be someone else too. Just this one
Oh yeah.
simple issue. One simple issue.
Right. That's a good point. I had a roommate in college. He used to drink like a whole gallon of green tea every day, talking about how healthy it was. And I
Yeah,
mean, he's
yeah.
had some serious issues looking back on his health, and just looking at him on Facebook and stuff. But
Yeah,
yeah, taking that iodine is critical. And intermittent fasting, like you said, I'm really glad you're doing it already. Most people
mm,
aren't, and
yeah.
when they start doing it, they notice an immediate boost of energy if they have these genes in particular.
Yeah. Like as I mentioned, 5:30 in the afternoon during the week. On the weekend, I'll go to probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, then eat. So, but what I find truly liberating about is you don't have to think about food. It's and
Right.
also you're fueling your own success throughout the day with body fat. I mean, how amazing is that? You're staying lean and healthy because, I don't know if a lot of listeners understand autophagy, but it's a scanner. It scans for dead, diseased, malfunctioning, precancerous and cancerous cells, metabolizes them into other building materials and also energy. I mean, how amazing is that?
Right. Yeah, it's phenomenal autophagy. And
Mm.
um like yesterday, I'm just thinking of my own self, my own life. I didn't eat until about noon, and then I had 5 egg yolks, and then I didn't eat until about 6 p.m.
Mhm.
And that's all I had. And then today I didn't eat until 2 p.m. And I get up at like 6 or 7, somewhere in that range. So, we're on pretty similar wavelength on that. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that most people should. Now, that some people can kind of get away with, they have phenomenal autophagy genes and they can get away with a little bit different. And it depends how young you are, right? And similar with these thyroid hormones, in everybody, they decline as we age. So, in my opinion, every 80-year-old should be on a little bit of thyroid replacement. They should bump theirs up a little bit. And again, there's no reason you should have low energy.
Mm.
Um, but how much should they take and all that kind of thing? You have to work with a doctor because you don't want to overdose it. You'll get heart palpitations.
Yeah, but then there's
Um,
doctors and there's doctors. Like I heard that interview you did with our friend Dr. Ken Berry. Like
mm-hmm.
he's really versed in thyroid function, and
Right,
that
right,
that interview, I guess I should point people to it because it's a big eye opener that a lot of classically trained doctors, they'll test your thyroid and they say it's fine, but it's not fine, right?
right, exactly. Yeah, you
Yeah.
definitely don't want to be on the low end of that range either.
Mm.
It's like testosterone, like you don't want to be on the low end of those ranges because so many people are. And it's because of terrible life choices and diets and exercise regimens that don't even exist. You can't even call it an exercise regimen because they're not even doing any.
Yeah, but as in your book, you can drink a glass of milk, grocery store bought milk, and crush your
Right,
testosterone. I mean, because it's full of not only natural estrogen from these cows, but also it's full of these artificial estrogens, which is worse again. So no
right.
wonder a
From
lot of people
the
just feel like
plastics. Yeah.
shit. If you don't have high levels of testosterone, you don't feel alive. You don't feel confident. It's a big
Right.
problem and it's easily fixed. And people
Well,
need to get your book
and
and
I,
read that book.
right, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think it's partly the problem with this COVID situation because, if you've got for men that have low testosterone, I mean, this might sound a little bit out on a limb, but men become a lot more receptive, a lot more apathetic. They just don't care what's happening around them. They don't care that, that they can't go to work. They're not standing up and fighting for freedom. And there's a lot more apathy and receptivity instead of questioning, and you can kind of
Yeah.
just let your freedom slip away.
You just
And I'm not
described me in my 30s.
right.
Yeah, that's how I felt in my 30s.
It's connected,
Mm,
it's all connected to that. And whether or not that's going to happen in this exact situation is up for grabs
mm.
still, but it's not a good thing, to be apathetic.
No, what I find vexing is that a few years back, before I got to a functional medical doctor, my classically trained doctor said, "No, like you're close. I mean, it's within normal ranges." But I felt like shit there. I didn't like how I
Exactly.
felt there, and it wasn't
Right.
until I went up to high that I came back online, and you just feel you operate in a
Right.
whole new level. It's completely different. And if there's any women listening, it is extremely important for women too, isn't it right?
Right. I
Mm.
was just going to say that. Yeah. Because it's hilarious. Some of the lab testing companies, they consider zero testosterone as normal in women. Like
No.
their ranges will sometimes they'll go from like 4 to 20 or 4 to
Yeah.
80 or something. But then other lab testing companies will say 0 to 20 or 0 to 80 or whatever. Like as if
Mm.
0 is a perfectly acceptable normal range.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
absurd. I mean, that's when you got to just throw out that you got to start using a different testing company, or at
Absolutely.
least self-educate, right? which is
Mm.
which is something people need to do anyways these days.
Yeah, definitely. Like in the periphery, stronger bones, stronger muscles, you stay leaner. I think from memory that it puts more glucose receptors on your muscles, so you're transporting more glucose into the muscles, so you've got more
Right.
viable glucose in the muscle. But for the brain,
Right.
confidence, optimism, and it lowers feelings of anxiety and fear. So this is why we need it at high levels. Like if you want to perform like an elite soldier and kick ass every day, you need it there. That's where we have to aim for it. But too many doctors are saying, it's good enough. That's average. I'm not here to be
Right.
average. I'm not here to be average. To hell with that.
Right. Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why it's, and the insurance companies, they only pay for these kind of things if you've got some serious issue. But people, I prefer it for my own self to be more proactive, and obviously you're doing the same thing. We're looking at your DNA, um, and finding these things before they happen, right? And trying to cut it off at the pass, and basically optimize your health before
Yeah,
it starts to decline, and then you don't have all the
absolutely.
expensive healthcare issues.
Mm. Yeah, a lot of people just accept the fact that as you age, you get tired, the memory doesn't work as well. But this podcast should give people a lot of ideas about what they can do to fix their low energy. Inflammation's a big one. Low testosterone's a big one. If you've got genes like me with a fast metabolism of dopamine and the serotonin's not quite there, there's things that you can do. There's levers that you can pull down on to fix that. And you've got all these boxes
Right.
that you can tick. Once you tick all these boxes, you're going to feel amazing. You're going to come back online. It might take 6 weeks, but this time next year, when you have energy day after day after day, and that builds, I mean, you're a new person. You're on a new trajectory in life. You operate in a whole new level.
Right. Yeah, I had the same experience, not
Mm,
quite as profound as you, I think, but when I was doing my PhD, I just basically stopped. I was stressed out. I wasn't really eating healthy. I wasn't even trying. I wasn't
mm,
exercising. And it just slowly caught up to me after a couple of years. And I realized, oh, now I've got acid reflux, and I've got this and I've got that. And it was really obvious. So I just buckled down and started going to the gym and started actually paying attention to my diet. And this is back when people were laughing about the idea of being gluten sensitive.
yeah,
And this
yeah,
was when people were scoffing at that, but I'm definitely gluten sensitive. So it
yeah,
made me skeptical of the system, because if scientists were all saying, no, gluten sensitivity is not a real thing, and then I clearly had it, I could feel it. Well, then I was
yeah.
saying, well, what else are they lying about? Or what else are they just straight up wrong about? And what else are scientists laughing about that we should be taking serious? You know what I mean? It caused me to kind of at least question.
Yeah, they're
Just
definitely
the
like
whole paradigm.
if you're not like I've got clearly a lot of bad genetics there, and if you don't feel great, and look, I'm 49, I feel fantastic, but if you don't feel like
Mhm.
that, you can fix that. But it all comes down to changing your diet clearly, but also having your genes read. Because if I take vitamin E, it's gonna untick a box. If I do something else, it's gonna untick those boxes. I want all those boxes ticked, and the only way you can do that is to reach out to a person like yourself and have your genes read specifically to tick all those boxes. So you've got energy, you've got high testosterone, you've got thyroid function, you've got growth hormone where it is. I mean, that's what people have to really start to consider.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, I couldn't have said it better than that as a kind of a final conclusion, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
I think you
yeah,
nailed it on the head, and I appreciate that.
yeah, yeah. Like it's people have got a lot of power, and it's time that they decided to take their power back, but they've got to invest in themselves. But once they invest in themselves, and they're a year ahead of where they are now, they'll just go, "Why didn't I do this earlier? I mean, seriously, why didn't I do this earlier?" Like your kids
Hmm.
will look up to you. You're just on it. You're a whole new person. It's just the amount of power that they have, and it's just waiting for them. And this is the entry point.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and you can do kids too. I mean, I've certainly done my kids. You know, I've done the DNA analysis for my kids. All you have to do is they have to be old enough to spit in a tube. You know, that little tube that 23andMe sends you.
Yeah,
Um, so my 2-year-old, of course, hasn't done it because she's not big enough. But I have 4 kids, and the other three, you know, it's really interesting. I've got them eating liver and stuff specifically because they have some retinol issues that,
yeah,
so they need more retinol, and a lot of interesting things like that that you know you wouldn't know without actually looking at the DNA. And clearly, our ancestors probably thousands of years ago were eating liver. You know, so I mean, it makes
yeah,
perfect logical sense, and now
yeah.
nobody in our culture is doing that.
That's right. So the ground had more nutrients in it, so they were getting their magnesium and potassium, and they were eating the whole animal, which had everything that you need, like the proper form of vitamin A, which plays into testosterone.
Yep.
So, if you don't get enough vitamin A, the retinol, not the from the carrot, the beta
Carotene, right? Right.
carotene. So it's got to be converted to retinol. And if you like for your kids, that's an important thing. They need to be getting retinol.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. So even for me, it was enlightening. I mean, um, and it's never too young. In other words, you know, like even for
No,
children.
no, no, no. Like, yeah, I mean, think about learning at school. That's a massive advantage if you have
Hmm.
your kids
Right.
kids read at school. Like, their dopamine. Like, if their dopamine's like mine, they'll be bored and they'll be all over the place, all over the shop. And if you learn how to fix that aspect, so they got more focus, they can learn
Mm,
faster.
right. Yeah, that's true. Not to mention exercise. I mean, I don't know what's the situation over there in Australia in regards to homeschooling. Is it
That's a
illegal, or do you hear about it?
Yeah, well, I've got 4 kids. Three of them are grown and don't live with me anymore. And I've got
Mhm.
one, she's turning 17 very, very shortly, and she's homeschooled right now. We do Zoom, like what we're doing right now. So she's at
Yeah, yeah.
school learning through Zoom, through the technology, which I think is a fantastic thing,
Right. Yeah, because most people don't realize I personally homeschooled growing up from seventh grade onward.
right?
And so I've been in private school, I've been in public school, I've homeschooled, and now I'm at Mayo Clinic. So, you know, you can definitely become an academic. Not that that should be necessarily a goal of everybody, but, you know, I suffered through it. And I'm really appreciative of the homeschooling component for my life because I was able to just basically exercise whenever I wanted to. I wasn't stuck sitting in a chair all day staring out the window.
Yeah, yeah,
um, and that physical aspect is really critical for brain development, particularly
mm,
for me, but for a lot of people that gets overlooked as kind of like a real minor part. Like, oh, it's not education, but it should be. You know, it
yeah,
should people should be learning how to deadlift if it's just a broomstick. You know, they should be learning proper form for squatting and just physical movement patterns and actually getting out and practicing those and moving and having fun with it. Um,
yeah, yeah.
that helps for kids in particular.
Now, I was an avid golfer until I was about 17, so I was outside most of the
Nice.
time. So I guess that truly helped me with my crappy genetics.
Right.
But
Yeah, I love golf. Yeah.
shortly after 20, my FTO gene took over and I got fat.
Yeah. Yeah, those are powerful genes, those FTO. The BBC did a whole 1 hour documentary
Yeah.
on that gene.
We didn't even talk
And
about that, did we? Have we talked about that yet?
no, it's in there though, for
There it
sure.
is. Is that it there?
You-
There we go. Look, so I've
yeah, you
got
got
a pretty impressive.
the worst ones you can have.
So I've got the worst obesity genes that you can have.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you could have other ones on top of that, but have 3++s on these FTO genes is definitely stacked up against you.
yeah,
It basically means your fat cells want to store fat more than most people. You don't want to burn it as energy. You just want to store it.
yeah. And considering the fact that these fake estrogens are stored in our fat cell and they promote fat
Right.
growth, holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
everything was stacked against me. Everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Like I say, we couldn't quite cover them all, but I'm glad you brought this one up because, yeah, a lot of people struggle with that fat conversion issue and this gene specifically. And usually it makes you a higher responder to cold showers as well.
Yeah.
And those are almost impossible to do consistently. But if you do the sauna and then right after that you jump in a cold shower, that's actually fairly doable. People can manage that on a consistent level. So that's another good idea.
Yeah. Well, for the listeners out there, I'm 49 very shortly. I've got these bad genetics when it comes to staying lean. And right now I'm sitting at about 10% body fat. So I'm not saying that to show you people how good I am, but I'm showing people saying this so they can pull down on the levers and get the results that I've got.
Yep.
And this isn't difficult to do. You don't have to think about food too hard when you implement into your life intermittent fasting and autophagy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely the funny thing about that BBC documentary called Why Are We Getting So Fat, where they just basically highlight this gene. They don't give you any solutions. They just basically say, oh, you've got this gene. It's a bummer. Be aware of it. Try and do portion control. Well, at the end of the day, that never really works,
Yeah. Well, the solution is really simple. You just select what kind of food that you want to eat, keto, carnivore, or paleo, and you can do what I do, go all over the place with those foods. Then get your genes read and take off and use autophagy and fasting. I mean, how simple is it?
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's why I list intermittent fasting in that section specifically, because it's necessary. You can't skip that step, when you have these genes in particular.
But I guess all those strategies that I'm using kind of make this FTO gene, not a problem at all.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And, you don't have to, it just takes consistency over a long period of time. And, that's what most people don't want to hear. They want to hear about a fat loss pill or something that they could take on this one. But, and to be honest, there is a peptide called MOTS-C, MOTS-C. And that one seems to be pretty specific to this particular FTO gene. But, I've personally tried that peptide and it didn't make me feel particularly good. Made me feel a little lightheaded, and I've heard that from other people. So, I think they're still kind of working on that one, but I'm still intermittent fasting, right? And it's not like I'm gonna just go to McDonald's and then start injecting this peptide and fix everything.
Yeah, definitely. Like in your book, like fast food is laden with these artificial estrogens. After you eat that, say goodbye to testosterone, DHEA, thyroid function, and your energy. Say hello to inflammation and stress hormones.
Exactly.
That I would just, if I started eating like that for a couple of weeks, I would put on about 5 or 10% body fat, I swear. Because I would just be lazy and just doing nothing. But you tick all the boxes.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It demotivates you, and then you start feeling less energy. So you stop working out, and It's brutal. It's not good for people.
Definitely.
Can't cheat.
And not to mention that gluten is addictive because it hits the opioid receptor. And I'm sure that they put soy in all that stuff too. So that hits the opioid
Yep.
receptor. And then you have your
Yep.
cappuccino, which is hits the opioid receptor. So all these things that they sell are addictive. So it's a very vicious
Mhm.
cycle.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, man. Listen, I think you've got a client to speak to shortly. Is that right?
Yeah, you got it. Yep.
Yep. So listen, that's, this is a great podcast, and I believe we've given people a lot of levers to pull down on. So where can people reach out to you? Like, if they come to me, I can give them a discount to go to you, but also, where is your website and what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, for sure. It's called ajconsultingcompany.com. It's a terrible website name, but I kind of came up with it a long time ago, and I can't change it at this point. But yeah, ajconsultingcompany.com. And again, I do recommend people go through you if they want that discount.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. So that, I guess that's all we have time for today, Dr. Anthony. And I appreciate your time. And we have given people a lot of hope and insight to realize that, they can tick those boxes and play on a whole new level.
Right. Thanks for having me, Mark.
All right. Good talking to you. And I'll catch you soon.
All right.
Okay. Bye.